it's critical that we all, in my mind at least, is critical that we all realize that we are nature. And it's critical because you can't respect nature when you think that you're separate from it. When you understand that you are nature, you take a different level of respect towards the things that are nature, which is everything else.
Welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. I am your host, Byron Pace, and this is episode 210. And I have a co-host.
You!
Mr. Sharp.
Yeah.
Is joining me because we've been working we've been actually doing some stuff which we'll talk about on a future podcast. In fact, we have a future podcast about it over the last week. But for the last 2 days, we've been in a cabin in the mountains of Colorado. And we've got another couple of days here, and we've just been buckling down and getting some work done.
Yeah, we are just outside of Estes Park. It's my dad's best friend. Has had a cabin here for 15 years, and it's just been a place I've always come to recharge and reconnect and listen to the wind blowing through the trees and the rocks. It's a great place to just buckle down, like you said, and just get some work done, but also take little nature hikes around lunchtime and stuff like that. So
it's the perfect combination to recharge and also be incredibly productive.
Yep.
Yeah. Except when I'm getting distracted scanning the mountaintops for mountain lions.
Yeah.
I keep on feeling like I'm going to see one up there.
They're out here. I mean, I've seen them on the cameras, and there's elk and mule deer and black bears and all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of wildlife activity in this area, but they probably hear us clickety-clacking on our keyboard and aren't coming around.
Well, for the last day, I've been periodically distracted by hummingbirds, which I only saw for the first time in my life about a year ago.
Really?
Yeah. And now I've probably seen more in one day than I had in the rest of my life put together.
Yeah, there's quite a few buzzing around here.
They're incredible. So this podcast with Josh, we recorded, I guess, 5 or 6 weeks ago now.
Yeah, I think that was end of May, early June, something like that.
Just for context, explain where we were when we were speaking to Josh and how that podcast came about and the collaboration with Tecovas and Outpost.
Sure.
Series.
So we were in Wimberley, Texas, which is, 40 minutes west of Austin, and it's on the Blanco River, and we were actually sitting on the porch of his train caboose that he converted into a guest house. And we had been doing some fishing with him and interviewing him. He was our feature story in Volume 9 that was presented by Tecovas. Really interesting guy, very diverse background, and kind of has an unlikely path that has led him to mentoring new hunters and anglers and naturalists. And so, yeah, we kind of, that was the context of us going down there, and it was one of those situations.
Along with having lots of fun.
Yeah, well, I had a phone call with him before we went down, and what was supposed to be a 30-minute briefing on what we were going to do turned into a 2-hour rant where we got really geeky about Star Wars movies and things like that. So we became fast friends.
It's okay, you're not going to hear any of that
on
the show.
No, so we became fast friends. And then when we got there, it was like we already knew him.
Yeah.
And we had a great time, and he's a great host and just a super passionate, smart guy. And we had a great conversation.
And so this is not the first installment of the Tecovas Outpost podcast series, but there's also a Tecovas Outpost digital series that exists as well. Just explain that relationship with Tecovas and how this is all coming together as one thing.
So Paul Hedrick is the founder of Tecovas. He approached me in, I think it might have been 2012 or 13, before the brand even launched. And he was introduced to me by some mutual friends, and they had recommended me to shoot some of his initial launch material. And so over the first few years of Tecovas' birth, I did a lot of work with Paul and Tecovas to help launch the brand and shoot catalogs and do some creative direction and hire ambassadors. So I go way back with them. I've got a special spot in my heart for that brand, and they make amazing boots. And
I can testify to that.
Yeah, and I like to tell everybody, I don't know if Paul will admit this or not, but they have a boot called the Wyatt, and it was named after Wyatt, the shaggy dog. So anyways, over the years, as they've grown, they started to move more into the outdoors, conservation, and tiptoeing into the hunting space. And it just, by serendipity or natural occurrence, we started to kind of partner back up. And so we're actually producing several stories a quarter for them that are both going on their blog called The Outpost. We're also doing some of these stories that are going in our print publication, but then as you know, obviously we're hosting some of the particular guests on the podcast that have really good overlap with.
So Malou was the last one we did.
Malou and a lot of ranching. We did one with North Bridger Bison with Matt Skoglund and stuff
I
like
still get comments about that to this day. Even though that released, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months ago, I still get emails about that interview with him.
So it's an ideal relationship with a friend brand, where our goals are kind of headed in the same direction, and we can kind of help each other out, us on the creative and production side and them on the distribution and larger awareness side. So yeah, it's been a great time, and we've been able to sync up on a lot of things, and we've got some more coming down the pipeline too.
And we, as Modern Huntsman, it's only a couple of weeks ago that Volume 9 started hitting people's doorsteps.
Yeah, that was an interesting situation with the global supply chain and paper shortage and all of that. So it was a little bit of a scramble and a gamble to get that one done on time. It was a little bit late for circumstances we couldn't control, but it is out in the world. We couldn't be more happy with it. And I think for anyone who has subscribed or ordered the issues, well, one, thank you, but you'll notice something different that we talked about a little bit in the editor's letters and some social, is that we actually did away with the theme. And so now it just became limiting. It was an interesting creative exercise to try to curate all these stories under one topic, but it became, we were
having to say no to stuff because it didn't fit a theme.
We
really wanted to print.
We're getting so many incredible submissions and people reaching out from National Geographic and other sort of avenues who are saying, I have this body of work. And after how many times of being able to say, oh, well, it doesn't really fit the theme, we're like, this is stupid. So anyways, we did away with that. And now we're having recurring thematic sections. So there are sections of the book that are thematic and that will be a part of every issue moving forward. And that just gives us more flexibility and the chance to kind of get ahead and dive deeper into specific topics. So other than that, it's, each one has been an evolution. And I think that this one is better than the last one. Even though you and I love Africa so much, I think that this one in particular is really, each time we're able to do a little bit more of what we wanted to do. And it's something I'm really excited about that I forced Byron to put into the back was what we're calling MH Studio. So we do a lot of work outside of just the book, and we haven't really done a great job of talking about it. We've shot a ton of films. We've done a lot of white label creative work. We've done strategy and consulting. We've done specialty podcast branded series we did with the Cabela's family, and then we did the Living with Nature with Swarovski. So in the back of the book, there's basically this kind of showcase of creative work that we've done outside of the book. And I'm excited about that because it's just going to give people a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain of what we do besides just make magazines.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that we talked about in that back of the book section is a film that we'll be releasing pretty soon about our guest editor of Volume 8, John Banovich, which actually we did a little private screening of at the event, at the Swarovski event.
That's true. We did. Yeah. It's, John's been a friend and a mentor of mine for about 15 years maybe. And we got to spend, 2 weeks pretty much in Kenya and Tanzania with him. And Byron shot an awesome, I keep saying your name in third person. You're sitting right next to me, but I'm talking about listeners, I guess. Shot an amazing film that is now finished and edited and color graded and everything. And we're going to be doing an online premiere of that pretty soon. So stay tuned.
Just check out Modern Huntsman's Instagram. That's where you're going to see everything.
Yeah, because you've cut what, 5 or 6 reels that sort of tease it out?
I've got 3 reels ready to go, and then some other posts as well, which are going to lead up to the premiere over the next coming weeks.
Video reels on Instagram for anyone who's not super savvy with what apparently is the only way forward with Instagram. So
all the cool kids know what we're talking about because we don't.
No, definitely not.
Well, I think that's probably enough for us for now. I'm going to let everybody get into this amazing conversation with Josh Crumpton. But the last thing I have to say before we get into that is a thank you to our Patreon supporters, who this week include Richard McNeil, Ronnie Speakman of Artie Contracting, James Marchington, the guys at South Ayrshire Stalking, Thomas Cameron, Mark Zabrowski, and Colin Knight. You can follow us over on all the socials at Modern Huntsman and myself at Byron J. Pace. Josh, welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. We have Tyler Sharp joining me in the post seat today as well.
Yeah.
We have just spent a spectacular morning on your pretty much brand new boat,
Yeah.
thrashing a lot of water, not seeing a hell of a lot of fish,
No.
but it absolutely didn't matter. What a fantastic morning. It was great to be out with you. Explain the context of where we are, where we're sitting, what part of the world, what the terrain's like, the river that we're on, just so people can paint a picture, because we're recording this outside, so you might very well hear things that are not really part of the podcast. So you're in the podcast with us on the side of the river.
Yeah. We're on the Blanco River in just outside of Wimberley, Texas. We're sitting at a large cedar table that me and my friend Francisco built. I think it seats about, 14, 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
Enough for a good party.
Yes.
We've had quite a few Thanksgivings out here on a deck overlooking what is a limestone bottom, so white with gypsum-colored water stream in front of a Missouri Pacific caboose, the Red Caboose, which is a guest cabin that we have on the ranch.
Which we stayed in last night. And it
Yeah,
was
Very
awesome.
nice.
Yeah.
And I also swam in the river that's behind us right now.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with my goggles on just looking at fish, which is
So
a
many
fantastic pastime.
Yeah.
And a lot of different type of fish. Give me an idea of what I was seeing yesterday. Some of them I'd never seen before.
Yeah, so you saw some gar.
I did. They're the
Yeah.
most spectacular.
Yeah, those little leopard gar with
Yeah.
their long, needly noses to them.
They're a predator, I assume.
They are a predator. Yeah, yeah. They're really fun to catch on the fly, but very difficult, but really fun.
Because their mouths are very narrow, aren't they?
Yeah, very narrow and a lot of bone. So some people just use like frayed flies with no hooks, like with this frayed rope. And they
Oh,
catch
so
them.
that when the teeth just bind to it?
Yeah, I don't do that, but that's one method. You can just get them with flies too, though. But it's just you got to be careful with the hook set. You saw some bluegill, probably some Rio Grande cichlids, which is the only cichlid that's native to the United States.
There's many, many, many of them in Africa.
Yeah, so many there. Yeah, but not here. This is the only one that's native to the U.S. and maybe North America. I can't remember. You saw some bass, probably some smallmouth, maybe some Guadalupe bass, which is endemic to the Texas Hill Country streams, and probably some hybrids between smallmouth and Guadalupe bass.
Well, it was a perfect way to spend yesterday afternoon, dipping in and out of the river on a very hot day. We've got so many things to talk about. We've been talking about all of the world's problems and some of the world's solutions on the river and on the lake today. But tell me a little bit about your upbringing. A lot of the things we've been talking about are things that we've been discussing the last sort of 2 days since I met you, has been the things that you're up to now. But tell me a little bit about your upbringing. I'm interested to understand, here's a person who's deeply fascinated by humans' connection to nature. But where did that come from? Where did that stem from?
Yeah, so it's windy out here.
It is windy.
That's the moral of today. We're
He's got a bigger windshield on his, and he's speaking most. So I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
You've also got your back to the wind.
So I grew up back and forth between Telluride, Colorado, and San Antonio, Texas. And I didn't grow up with a strong male role model that got me out into the woods camping and hunting and fishing and doing all those sort of things. I had a grandfather who did all that stuff. But he and I were never able to really make the connection to do those things together. My family, my religious upbringing, guns were kind of a no-go in our world. And my grandfather was a huge hunter, so I think that was a barrier, was my family.
So you weren't allowed to interact because of the gun?
Yeah, because of the gun thing, yeah.
Okay.
But I remember, being in Telluride, when I was 12 years old, I came to fishing kind of on my own. And the way that went down was I had this friend of mine, John Gowdy. He's a ski patrol in Telluride, Colorado still. He's a fiery, redheaded, swarthy swarthy from being in the sun because he's like defied the factor. This is like the most tan, redheaded man you will ever meet.
I understand the difficulties. I never thought I'd hear tanned redhead in the same sentence.
No, he is.
Did his freckles just join up?
They may have. He's a true mountain man. He's a great guy. But he and his dad would go fly fishing a lot. And I remember, when I was younger, him sort of telling me the stories of him and his dad fly fishing. And I didn't really have that figure in my life. And I now can reflect and say that my desire to go fly fishing was about getting this strong male role model figure in my life. But what I did is in Telluride, everything was done on charge account. So you'd charge at the grocery store, you'd charge at the sporting goods store. And so I decided one day I was going to roll down to the sporting goods store. I timed it to be at the first of the month, so it would be the longest for the bill getting to my mom as possible. And I charged an Orvis, I don't know what kind of rod. It was probably like their version of a Clearwater rod.
Yeah.
They may have even made those back then, I think. I charged this rod and the whole setup, and I went and tried to teach myself how to fly fish, and I did a absolutely just terrible
That's
job.
a hard task, though, to not have anybody to show you.
Yeah, I mean, I had books,
Okay.
so I bought books.
This is before YouTube, where you could just watch something.
Yeah, no, I bought books. And I used to read. I loved reading. Like, I would spend summers when I was in San Antonio, I'd ride my bike down to the book stop, and I would just go in and just read. I just, like, hung out and escaped the heat by reading. I was a big book nerd. So so I did that with fly fishing, picked up books and read, and went around, and I'd hide the rod and sneak it out of the house and go and try to fish. And, my mom, the bill finally came, and she called the shop, and she was like, no, we didn't buy a fly rod. And they're like, yeah, Josh came in and bought a fly rod. So
How'd that go down?
yeah, I got in some trouble. It wasn't really that bad because I think my mom realized what I was up to more than I did, and realized that this was something that I needed for my own, mental health at that age. And so I had to do some work to pay off the rod. And then she bought me some fly casting lessons, and I learned to cast the thing after a month of being frustrated, and caught my first fish. And ultimately, a guy by the name of Dan Lansing, who was like Dan and June Lansing. Dan, June, Nathan, Todd, and Emily, the Lansings. They lived behind us in Telluride, and they were like the Cleavers, like the Leave It to Beaver, just perfect family. And so I was pretty envious of them always. And Dan saw me out there messing with my fly rod, and he was like, do you want to come fishing with me and my boys? And so I went out fishing with them. And he kind of like, the world changed when he started talking to me about bug life cycles and entomology.
Okay.
And I got to see.
So now it was more than just about casting for fish.
Yeah, and it was taking all the stuff that I read in a book.
Yeah.
And actually having somebody take me out there and show me it, and a hands-on connection to it. And that made all the difference. And from that point forward, I was a fly angler, and I would go with Todd and Nathan and Dan on occasion, and I would walk to the rivers myself. And as soon as I got my driver's license, I drove all over southwestern Colorado fishing.
So judging by the passion for fishing that I've seen today when we were out on the lake, I'm assuming that has been a constant through your life since that day.
I wish I could say that, actually. I fished, I skied, I kayaked, I rock climbed. I did all of that stuff. And then I got older and went to college, found girls. And
It happens.
And girls replaced like all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like,
It's like all those things combined.
yeah, I was like, this is way cooler than any of those things. And I don't know. And then life happens. You start a family, and I got in the restaurant industry, and I just stopped doing all the outdoor stuff. Absolutely all of it.
For quite a long period?
A really long period. Yeah, probably 15 plus years. Yeah, probably about 15 plus years. And when I retired from the wine industry, when I got out of that industry, I was like, what am I going to do with myself? And I kind of took a moment to decompress, and I found skiing again. And in finding skiing again, I reconnected myself to nature to some extent. but that's still, skiing is kind of one of those things that you can do where you're just zipping through nature, not really necessarily connecting to it. It's interesting because I feel like that way about like mountain biking, kayaking. This is not to knock any of those things because they're amazing, but I think them as a recreation vehicle themselves are not necessarily going to connect you to nature. They're going to put you in nature.
But it doesn't require participation within nature.
It doesn't. Like observing nature itself, and looking at the species in nature is not required for those things. So when I wasn't fishing and I was just skiing, and I was telling you guys earlier, I picked up the Omnivore's Dilemma, read the book, read all 3 of the sections. If anybody's read it, it's a great book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. But it talks about 3 food systems, and one of them is the mainline agricultural sort of industrial complex that is, factory farming, and the other one is sustainable farm movement, and then the last one is the foraging and hunting. And Michael Pollan does this great job of walking you through the whole thing that culminates in him eating a meal.
So each section ends in eating a meal
From
that system.
From that system,
Okay.
yeah. So like the system, like the farm complex, industrial farm complex system, is he tries to buy a cow and then follow his cow from field to meal. And he very quickly learns that as soon as the cow hits the feedlot,
Where's my cow?
Yeah, he's not going to find his cow. So he doesn't find his cow. But he ends with eating a McDonald's meal as being like the end product of factory farming. And then he goes to Joel Salatin's Polyface Farms, and he lives there for 3 months, and he helps raise chickens and do the rotational grazing. And, then he ends that with a meal that he harvests himself and a chicken that he, kills himself, and he eats this meal. And then the last one, he learns to forage, and he goes and he forages, and he kills a wild boar in California, and he makes this meal out of foraged foods and out of a boar that he killed. So I put the book down, and I told my wife, I was like, I want to start a sustainable farm at the ranch in Texas. And she's great. She's like very supportive. She's like, yeah, of course you do, and we can do that. She's like, of course you do, and let's make it happen.
So how old are you at this point?
God, I guess it's like 34 or 5, somewhere in there. And so there's that wind. So I picked up a bunch of books, went back to I'm sure you're picking up a reoccurring theme here. So I went and picked up a bunch of books, and I read a lot about it. And it's like a year and a half of reading Joel Salatin's books, just in like how to lay out a farm, and I sketch out farms on paper, and I'd like, okay.
So you're very much the planner.
Yeah, I was build the system, plan the system. I was a computer science major. So
okay, well that explains something.
Yeah, building systems, So I built the system, and then I came and like hand built the garden that we went and got some cucumber weed out of.
Just been sampling some, yeah.
That I got hammered by bull nettle, and so I was like, "Don't hit that bull nettle."
Immediately, just after you told me not to scrape by it,
I ran it like 5. It's like ow, ow, ow. So I hand built that with my friend Francisco, and then like the day we went to plant things, my wife and I get out there and we're gonna plant things, and I'm like, guess what? I hate planting. I hate gardening. I don't want to be a gardener. Like, it's like, this sucks. So, to me, hunting had not been an option because guns were such a negative my whole life. But I was I'm like 3 years committed into like participating in my food system, and I realized I'm not going to grow it. So it's like, I am going to shoot something. Like, I'm going to
You're
hunt.
not a farmer.
Yeah, I'm not a farmer. So clearly I am going to hunt. And I thought about foraging, but that was a little, again, like, you can pick up a book and read about foraging, but then when you start going out there and like picking plants, you're like, well, is this going to kill me? Do I have this right?
Yeah.
It's tough. And so I decided that I would hunt. And so I took a class, learned to butcher a hog at a farm, and came back to the ranch and went out and shot, killed, and harvested, butchered, processed a doe by myself, and did a pretty terrible job at the butchering and processing the first time. I cried when I shot the doe. It was a heavy impact moment for me. But, as I was going down the journey of reading Polyface Farms, all these books, all these Joel Salatin books, I was also reading about ranch management and wildlife management. And I became a Texas master naturalist in the process.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Is that a course?
Yeah, it is. It's a really cool course. And it started here in Texas. A&M, TAMU, AgriLife, TPWD partnered together to create a program called the Master Naturalist. It's international now. Other states have adopted the program as well. It was a cool program that had been designed specifically because Texas is 97% private. And what you had is a lot of generations that had started to live in the city and were getting disconnected from the land, and general wildlife and land management practices were being lost. And even just the idea that you have to manage the land, like the responsibility for it. Some tracts of land were just sitting, fallow, and just like all sorts of terrible things were growing up that were blocking out all the native plants that should be there. And animals, were procreating and reaching population densities, and it still happens today, that are not, the land is not able to support. And so this course was made to, in like a compressed time frame, teach someone who is a landowner what they need to do to take care of their land. It's since changed. The program is much more geared now at fostering volunteers to get volunteer hours back into state parks, public lands, which is also a huge need. But the basis of the things that you need to learn to manage your land responsibly are all in that Master Naturalist course. So, yeah, it's cool. It's really neat. And as you study that course and you start to learn and read, you realize that there's too many deer. Somebody has to shoot the deer. Somebody has to keep the populations in check because there's no more predators, because we got rid of the predators, because they don't jive with, our ever-expanding suburban backyards. And so I became really right with the idea of hunting before ever deciding to be a hunter. And I approached it from a habitat standpoint of like, okay, I need less deer so I can have better habitat for turkeys.
It's part of the management system.
Yeah. So even though it was really difficult to shoot that first doe, I also knew that it was something that needed to happen. It was a process that needed to happen on this property. So that's how I came to hunting, sort of on my own, cobbling together, reading, and doing that solo. Wow. Yeah, it was fun. It was challenging, actually.
Tell us a little bit more about, we talked about this a little bit in the Tecovas story, but tell us a little bit more about Spoke Hollow in particular and kind of what you do here and what some of that larger vision is. Some of that we want to keep to ourselves because we're going to roll that out together.
Yeah,
but give us a little bit more background there.
That, by the way. So, Spoke Hollow, my wife and I, this is a family property. Her grandfather bought it in the 40s. And he lived here till he passed away in the 70s, I believe. Then her grandmother lived here on her own for another 20 years, I think, almost, till she passed away. And really, after her grandfather was not around, there was really no steward of this property. So it's a 1,000-acre property, 45 minutes from Austin, an hour from San Antonio, and a pretty desirable area where the ranches are being cut up and turned into ranchettes, and there's not a lot of larger scale land management happening. And this place sat and turned into a cedar forest, basically, which is what will happen if you leave a piece of property alone in the hill country.
And for people who don't know cedar, is that a problem?
Yeah, it is. It's an ash juniper, and it's a problem. It's a misunderstood problem.
Is it native?
It is native.
It is.
It's a native aggressive, though.
Okay.
Its traditional management tools were fire and bison.
Okay. So fire repression now and bison long gone.
Yeah. And the cedar just hasn't got the memo. Cedar's a pretty cool plant because what it does is it grows. You got me on a cedar tangent.
I'm all good with that.
I'm going to try
I'm all good with tree tangents.
I'm going to try to make it brief. But cedar grows really aggressively because the heavy amount of fire it used to face and the bison activity that it would face.
So it had to be aggressive or it wouldn't exist.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And now there's no bison, no fire. It is just it just like blots out hillsides in the hill country. Just stops light from ever reaching native riparian and upland grasses that need to be in spaces. So the cedar needs to go, but it also has a historic. I mean, that one time there was people who said, "Oh no, cedar is not native," but we have a bird, and this is not so popular with so many people, but I'm just going there anyways. We have a bird, the golden cheek warbler, beautiful bird, that does all of its nesting here in Texas. Every single one of them is born in the Edwards Plateau area of Texas, and then they spend their winters in Mexico. And they exclusively build their nest out of old-growth cedar. So this bird didn't evolve to do that in the time that Europeans got here. This plant has been here for a long time, and it has a biological web that works around it. So, that was one of our main targets, was to manage the cedar on the property and get it to a manageable place. And so we do that in a couple of ways that are unique. We don't use bulldozers. We don't use cedar beetles, which are these bobcats with these rotating drums on the front of them that push over the trees and suck them under and pound them and grate them and turn them into this mulch. I don't use those things because they're too disruptive to the top layer of soil where all the good microbes live that are creating soil, the soil creators that take a very long time to build back if you disturb that soil. So we hand remove them all by chainsaw.
Okay.
And
it sounds intensive.
Yeah, it's a labor. It is a labor. I did it for years. I don't do that as much now. I've got other much younger than me people who do that. I get out there on occasion, though. I definitely just to do it, especially in the spring.
And you can keep up with it?
No. But we can do our best. We can be the buffalo. We can be the fire, and we can in key places remove the cedar, places where we need riparian grasses to grow. But the positive of cedar, right? I mean, there's no free lunch in nature, is the saying. Everything, there's a give and take to everything. The give that I've observed that cedar does is the cedar, if it loses all of its little green leaves, stops growing. It's gone. That's it. It will not, it will die. So you can cut them off and leave a stump. If there's nothing green, it's gone. But the wood lasts forever, which is why a lot of the fences out here were made from cedar posts, because the woods, I mean, there's 60, 70-year-old fence posts out on this ranch that are still intact with
That's amazing.
cedar staves.
Are they just high in resin or?
A lot of resin,
yeah,
a lot of oil in them. But the leaves, the little green leaves, they decompose very quickly. So these leaves are constantly dropping, making a substrate. And in a normal world, fire might come through, burn all the leaves off of a cedar tree. It might waver there until it falls over. And then once it falls over, it becomes an erosion catch on the side of the hills. And that wood will stay there forever. And it just dropped all of this substrate. And the substrate then builds the grass. So cedar is a soil grass builder. And so we try to manage it in a similar way to allow it to grow soil. And there's a bunch of people in the hill country who hate me right now because they're like, kill all the cedar. And I'm like, well, kill 90% of the cedar. Save 10%.
It's so common with these. It's this all or nothing approach that so much is the case in the conservation world.
Yeah.
Trees are all good, or a certain tree is all bad, or a particular weed is all bad, or a certain animal is all good or all bad. And it's normally somewhere in the middle.
Takes a village. Even with the plant village, takes a plant village. You know, it's really interesting because people will commonly say that cedar drinks 35 gallons of water a day, and they make that statement, and I'm like, well, I always look at them and say, which one? That 3-foot tall cedar or that 10-foot tall cedar? Which one's drinking 35 gallons? How much does an oak tree drink? How much would grass drink if it was there? So the amount of water that the cedar drinks is not necessarily a strong argument. But the one thing that I will agree on is that it grows in such a tight, a tight mesh canopy that it outcompetes everything on the ground. And so for that reason, that's a good argument.
So you get no understory really under it?
No, not really. A lot of that cucumber weed grows under it.
Well, it tastes good.
Yeah, it does. And little blue stem grows under it. And cytotsgrama grows under it. And buffalo grass. So when you cut it and you move it out of the way, those grasses take off big time. So, yeah. So we started the outfitter, to circle way back to a half hour ago when I went on the cedar tangent. We started the outfitter to raise capital to do the projects that need to happen on the ranch. And so that the ranch could be a self-sufficient entity. It was, okay, let's start this outfitter. And very quickly, that turned into meeting up with some folks at Stewards of the Wild, putting on some mentored programs, teaching, and then realizing that that fulfilled a desire for myself to create a pathway to becoming a hunter or an angler in a way that connected you to nature, in a way that like draws somebody in to where they can actually have a nature connection through these traditions.
Because when people would have heard you say outfitter before you just explained this next bit, and we're going to dive into that more, that is not the traditional outfitting route, where most outfitters are really designed for people who kind of already know that this is a world that they want to be in, and they want to go and hunt, and most of them could probably go and do it by themselves without any kind of mentorship. That's how most outfitters are established. Why was it important for you to take a few steps back and create a system that could let people through the door who maybe didn't know anything about it whatsoever, but where the focus was not so much the doing, but the connecting?
Yeah. I think that I can't tell you that there was one moment that became like the focus. It sort of happened over time. I came to hunting as somebody who was studying sustainable farming and land management. I didn't come to the woods because my dad or my grandfather said, this is what we do in fall, is we take the rifle and we go out and we sit in the blind and we shoot a deer. I came to it with a desire to connect to this piece of property and with a desire to take on the responsibility of the ownership of this piece of property. And so I think it's a natural extension to want to bring people down the path that you took. So,
because you would describe yourself as a late onset hunter, would you?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, definitely an adult onset hunter. Because I was in my mid-30s when I came to hunting. And of all of the things that I did, fly fishing and hunting, ultimately hunting because I came to it later in life, were the things that connected me the most to nature. Even though I was camping and hiking.
Yeah, it's not like you weren't spending time in the outdoors before.
Yeah, but I wasn't a naturalist yet. It was fly fishing, and consciously became a naturalist through hunting. And what I have found is that a lot of people who've been hunting their whole life aren't naturalists. And with our mentor programs, it's been cool to see people who come to be a mentor because they have a set of skills, technical skills, that they can teach, watching them learn about being a naturalist and watching that improve their ability to enjoy their hunting has been pretty amazing.
Why do you think that is the case? That there is this section of, well, we're just talking about hunting in particular here, in this case, that has missed that step? Because I would say that if you were to go back like 60, 70 years ago, there was the proportion of people who were also naturalists. And I make that judgment based on either speaking to people who are now dead or reading the books.
You can talk to dead people?
I have spoken to them when they were alive, but it's since passed away because they're very old. I wish I could. Or reading books from that era. And there was very much more a naturalist mindset about the way that they explained their place in the world and the observations that they were making. Yeah. That's the same. That is true of a lot of the fishing books that I've read, which a lot are decades old, as much as it is the hunting books.
Yeah, less technical skills focused, I think.
Less gear focused.
Yeah, a lot less gear. We've become very gear focused. Yeah. I think we live in a consumer world, you know. Gear is cool. I love gear.
Yeah, who doesn't?
I love great gear, and I love great gear companies. But I think the real idea is to just be outdoors. You know, it's interesting that you say that because I think you're right that people were more connected to nature. And there's a study I was reading the other day that actually goes back to the 50s. So it would be 70 years when our connection stopped or started to diminish from nature. And I will argue right now, though, that hunting in the South often can be less connected to nature because there's a lot more allowance for baiting and a lot more tactics that can allow you to not have to observe nature. Whereas I will say a lot of the people who hunt the West, if you're going to find the animals, you have to know a lot more about animal sign.
Okay.
Because you can't bait them. So you do have to.
It's a function of necessity.
It is a function of necessity that if you're going to find the animals. So what I have found, though, but there's so many hunters in the South. And so what I have found is teaching them a lot more about animal sign and teaching them a lot more about what animals are eating and teaching them. And some people do get the sign. They get the sign. They got like the prints. They got all that sort of stuff, but they don't understand like this is what these forbs are here for. And so whitetail are going to eat these forbs. And so if you see these forbs, you know, and oh, look, if you see, you know, greenbrier that's been snipped off like this, that's deer browsing it. So you know they're kind of in this area. Anyways, the study in the 50s was studying all of the words in pop culture, sunshine, the deep blue sea, you know, stars, flowers, roses, and looking for their appearance in songs and writing.
Okay.
And there has been a decline in the appearance of nature words since the 1950s to now in writing. So
does that have to do with the invention of television?
Probably. You know, I mean, TV technology,
yeah.
You know, less time in nature, urbanization, spending more time in cities. I mean, we're not connected to nature the same way, and it's not supported in our pop culture. And if it's not supported in our pop culture, it quickly becomes irrelevant to future generations. So, to me, having been in the outdoors for a long time, I think the calling to bring adults through a program to connect them to the outdoors and using hunting and fishing as a platform to do that was just it was a collision that I had been sailing along on a boat for a long time towards, and it just took me until I was in my 40s, you know, early 40s to run into all of the right things to have that be where I am and what I do now.
So what does one of those courses look like? And who are the spectrum of people that would come to them?
Yeah, so we have targeted 21 to 45 is the groups that we've mostly been working with, young professionals. I just came back from a program where we were doing education on trout in Wisconsin, and that was actually a lot of like 50 plus. And I want to see us expand and change like what our demographic is a little bit, but I do like this 21 to 45-year-old demographic that we've been working with. And it's mostly people, I found that it's people who want to get connected typically a little bit more to their food source. That's what they come in for. And a lot of programs have focused on skills in food. And our programs are different. So we have 4 of them. We have Enter the Uplands, First on the Fly, Big Game Basics, and then a new one that we will roll out this year is Field Skills Foundations. And the first three are very self-explanatory. They're consumptive in nature. And then Field Skills Foundations is primitive skills, learning to start a fire, camping, foraging, navigation, things that just generally you can use to enhance your enjoyment in the outdoors, whether you're a hunter or angler or not. But we teach those things in the same way that we teach the hunting and angling courses, which starts with telling people, when they get there, they sign up. They're like, "Oh, I'm going to learn to hunt." So, for example, somebody says, "Oh, I'm gonna learn to hunt. I'm signing up because I want to learn to hunt." And then they get here and we set up our tents and we sit down and we have a big old round table conversation where we talk about expectations and what we're going to do. And the facilitator at the end tells them, my objective over the next couple of days is to turn you into a sporting conservationist. And then they explain what that means, which is somebody who has accepted or adopted the idea of conservationism. They also explain that not all hunters and anglers are conservationists. Just because you buy a license doesn't make you a conservationist.
It's an argument that gets thrown around quite a lot, though.
Yeah, people are like, "I'm a hunter, so therefore I'm a conservationist." Well, no, you're not. You're a hunter, or you're an angler, but you're not a conservationist. And the reverse side of that is there's a lot of people who are birders that never buy a fishing license or never buy a hunting license, and they're more of a conservationist, even though they're not buying a license. So buying a license doesn't make you a conservationist. It just means that a byproduct, to definitively sum it up, I buy a lot of things and my sales tax go to a lot of things. I am not a road constructionist. I mean, just because a tax that I paid,
you're forced to.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a road constructionist. I'm a bridge builder. No, you're not. You're just a person whose taxes are going to support those things. And so we explain that to people, that just buying a license doesn't make you a conservationist. You have to adopt the philosophy of conservationism, which is that it is our responsibility to conserve, not preserve, but conserve the resources that the earth has, whether they're plant, mineral, animal, water, whatever it may be. We have to conserve them. We have to use them wisely.
Do you explain the difference?
Yeah.
Because some people won't get that. Preserve and conserve.
Yeah, we do. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But I do love to have that conversation because I'm not here to preserve anything. I'm here to, if somebody came along and said, "Josh, we're going to preserve you at 7 years old," I'd be like, "Absolutely not. I want to age. I want to get old. I just want to be the best version of myself as I age and get old."
Because there is, it's a carry-on from certain conservation, the John Muir conservation mindset of years gone by that still feeds through today, that preservation is an effective tool and mechanism. And I think that there's maybe some argument for protected, preserved areas as some sort of nucleus, but on a landscape scale, it doesn't work unless you want to remove humans from that landscape.
Yeah, well, and beavers and ducks and everything else that changes the habitat too. We are part of that landscape as much as they are. We
are nature.
We are nature. Yeah. We are nature, and I think that's a big part of becoming a conservationist and being connected to nature is accepting our position as part of it, not that it is something separate that needs to be saved, by us, from us. And so it's interesting that once we settle on the idea that the goal of the program is to turn these people into becoming conservationists, and I also explain that just buying into the philosophy doesn't make you a conservationist. You take the extra step to do something consciously to impact conservationism, whether it be volunteerism.
So there's an active component, not just a passive.
Yeah,
interest.
you can't just be like, yes, conservationism is wonderful. Let's do that. Other people,
That's always someone else's problem. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do something. You have to go and volunteer some time, or advocate for it. Even it can't just be talking; it can be advocating somebody else to action. I guess so. I guess it's like do something. But you've got to donate. You have to join a group. You have to vote. You have to take that extra step to become a conservationist. And we tell people that we believe the quickest way to get them there is to teach them to view the world through the naturalist lens. So that's a whole other categorization. There's conservationism, and then there's the naturalist. And using the naturalist lens, we define that as taking a conscious effort to study a species over an extended period of time to understand the way it interacts with the environment, as in how it impacts the environment and how the environment impacts it, which we believe that when you do that, you ultimately start asking the questions of how do I fit into this? It's in human nature to, as you're asking questions, then apply them back to yourself. So you start to ask the questions of how do I impact that environment? And then hopefully, if you have a conscience, you are like, how can I positively impact that environment? And like in an upland hunting program, we will tell people something along the lines of, we're going to study upland birds over the next couple of days. And at the end of it, you're going to understand how they need these native clump grasses to survive. And you will understand how having those native clump grasses ultimately provide clean drinking water for the world and help us survive. And that's seeding us back into nature.
Well, and Josh, you said something, I don't remember if it was last night or earlier when we were fishing, but about the difference between, and I don't want you to go into the details of the program because I think there's something really special about the surprises you have in store for people, about their expectations versus what the curriculum is. But you said something about it's harder to measure that because with our 3 programs, people can say, okay, well, this person bought a license and we have this to show for it. But the difference between that and what you guys are focused on and the possible long-term effects that might have.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I just came back from an R3 conference and in Oklahoma.
You'll have to explain R3 for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think it's, good point. So R3 is recruit, reactivate, and retain. And it is a hunting world thing in the U.S., and it's focused on bringing new hunters in, reactivating ones that fell out, and then retaining them in. And the whole end objective is a metric done by hunting and fishing license sales. And right now in the U.S., hunting and fishing license sales are how a state accesses the Pittman-Robertson Fund Act funds, that is the excise tax on firearms, ammo, bows. So all of that money is getting in a big pile, put in a big pile federally, and your state, based upon the number of licenses you sell, receives their portion of those federal funds based on that. So selling more licenses, in theory, sells more ammo, sells more guns, sells more bows, creates more money, and brings more money back to your state. And so what I heard when I was at the R3 conference is a lot of talk about measuring success, as you were saying, Tyler, based upon, did the person buy another license? So they would look at a program like ours and say, if the person didn't buy another license next year, then it was unsuccessful. And my argument, or the question, an argument really, my question was, is the objective a license sale, or is the objective to create a conservation-minded individual, somebody who votes for conservation dollars to be created, or somebody who goes back to their house and plants a butterfly garden and xeriscapes and, tries to use native plants, gets rid of all their St. Augustine, and they impact positive conservationism on that scale. If they never buy a license again, in my opinion, if they have become conservation-minded then that's a win. I do understand how that's not a good fit for state and federal governments because it's very hard to track or measure. And I think that's where the private sector has to come into this movement, because in the private sector, we don't have to have that same sort of, we don't have to justify our budget every year, like unfortunately, most people do, and justify to a new administration why these things are important. If it's financially viable and the free market supports it, then we can continue to do it. And so that's really the end goal of our programs, is not to have you come back and hunt or fish if it's not for you, but to have you become a conscientious conservationist.
And I mean, do you have, what is your kind of your gauge of your own success in that?
Yeah,
Following up with people, seeing what they're doing.
Yeah, so we typically stay in touch with them. And, we've got so many other things that we do here at the ranch. Like right now we're doing the Spoke Hollow Live series where we just planted a pollinator garden and had a concert after it. And
as part of it?
Yeah.
Oh, so what, the people who were at the concert did some of the planting?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That.
Yeah. So we do things like that, and that's a touch base. Like a lot of our community comes back to these things. They're small, they're limited. We do 25 to 35 people. We'll do another unique series that you'll hear about in the fall. But that's a good gauge for us. Another gauge that we've used are how many people stay in and are active participants in the program. And they are buying hunting and fishing licenses, yes. But when they're staying engaged with our program, we can see that they are dedicated to conservationism. Because here's the deal. Somebody could leave a program. If you came to a program that was really just teaching you how to kill an animal and turn it into food, they could leave that program, buy a hunting and fishing license, go into the woods, not dig cat holes, just crap on trails, leave plastic and trash in the woods, and, go bear hunting, shoot a bear, and that's it. That's not a positive outcome, right? I mean, that's not a conservationist mentality. So the way we've done it is our community keeps feeding back in, and we keep developing people over time, and hopefully they learn to be a conscientious conservationist. Did I say like somebody takes a crap on a trail?
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, we won't even bleep that out.
No, it makes sense.
There's been far worse stuff there on this show. But no, I mean, you make a very good point. Yeah, just because you're wielding a gun doesn't make you a conservationist.
Yeah, or fishing.
Or whatever, a bow.
Yeah.
Is anybody who's come to the... I mean, I guess they kind of know what they're getting into before they get there, but you have these sort of... you're not hunting on day one, necessarily.
Yeah.
Have you ever had feedback that some people are like disappointed, or once you've taken them through what is a journey, by the time they leave those couple of days, they understand why you kind of force them to slow down and go through that process?
Yeah, we haven't had anybody disappointed, which is really cool. I mean, maybe one day we'll run across somebody who's like, less talking, more shooting, and I would be like, well, okay, this might not be the place for you. I don't know, but no, we haven't had anybody who's disappointed, or at least has told us that they are. I think it's been really successful. It's a good way our program is a really good way to bring people into the outdoor space, and it gives them so much more than what I hear people leaving saying is, I gained so much more than I thought I was going to gain. I came here and thought that I was going to learn to shoot quail or catch fish, but I left with a better understanding of the natural world, and that gift is much larger. So I think that's cool. I love it when that happens.
Something you were saying earlier about really dedicating yourself to understanding a particular species. Well, I can think of a handful of friends who just are fascinated by a particular species and have maybe even gone and studied them and done PhDs on them. that's not the norm, but it is very much the norm among people who do various types of field sports, whether they are obsessed with elk hunting, and they will tell you things about and have seen things about elk that have maybe not even been on nature shows. And I know a lot about Atlantic salmon just because I've been fascinated about them since I was a tiny little kid and have read everything that I could lay my hands on. That you only really get that fascination because there was also a pursuit of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where
there's a depth that you would never. I just don't think you would go into.
No,
not at the same extent.
No, unless you become consumed with the pursuit of the species.
Yeah,
I think,
which is much rarer.
Yeah, it is more rare for people to get there on their own. But I think if you jumpstart people with a generalist, because I'm not really obsessed with any one species. And I wouldn't say that my depth of knowledge in species goes super deep in any one. I'm more of a generalist. I'm actually looking for the connectivity in nature. I'm fascinated by that. And that's what we're trying to teach people. And it's what's cool about it is you can go and you can study and get a PhD, or you can go and pick up a lot of books like I've done many times in my life and read those things. But it's the anecdotal stuff, just those general observations in the field. And, it's learning that, if I'm into upland hunting, birding is a really cool thing for me to do. That doesn't mean that I need to get my binoculars and go out, because I don't do that. I can't go out and sit for 4 hours and bird. I wish I could, but I need to move around more, and I got to be more active. And so, but it is that when I'm in the field, I'm not just looking at quail. I'm observing the raptors. I'm observing the buntings. I'm observing, the finches that may be around, and just I'm focusing on birds when I'm out bird hunting. When I'm fishing, I'm focusing on fish and what's going on in the water. And when I'm turkey hunting, I'm focusing on turkey and only turkey. That's it.
It's something I still haven't done. But having read a recent turkey hunting story, and heard many people recently talking about it.
You saw two today.
Oh, yeah, I did see two when we were on the boat. I have to go and do this.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, you do. You will become obsessed. Turkey.
Well, Josh, there might be some people listening to this who, might be intrigued, or maybe putting questions in their mind. Is this for me, or is this not for me? In your opinion, what is the qualification for your program? Who is this for? And obviously that's not necessarily a demographic so much as a mindset, but what's that premise?
So to me, it's for everybody.
Yeah.
Whether you've never hunted or fished, or whether you've been doing it your whole life. Because if you've been doing it your whole life, maybe you haven't fly fished. So come jump through a fly fishing program. Or maybe you have hunted big game your whole life, but maybe you've never really paid attention to how the flora and fauna interact with each other. So, come out and take the program. I promise you'll learn something. We get into a lot of cooking stuff that people who've hunted their whole life are like, "You mean you cook the neck roast?" I'm like, yeah, you do cook the neck.
You don't?
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you do. They're like, oh, we just took it into the processor. I've got people here in Texas specifically that have just they shoot the deer and they take it to the processor. So this is a good course for somebody who's been hunting a long time but hasn't processed their own animal.
Yeah.
And then there's Field Skills Foundations, which just about anybody can pick up something from that. Just about anybody can learn something from that. So
hunting, fishing, outdoors community in general has been talking much more in recent years about how they can be more inclusive across different sects of society and different communities around the world. What do you see as ways and solutions to that question about making it more welcoming?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna open them.
Just crack it
Yeah,
open.
just do it.
Just
I
gonna
mean,
do it.
Tyler's like the king of the beer.
Yeah.
Open. Yeah, that's
whenever I
one,
come on the
two.
podcast. I just drink beer and make jokes. That's my job.
How can this make the outdoors more inclusive?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's a perception that there's a problem.
yeah,
For a start, which is that it is not necessarily inclusive.
yeah, and I do think
We've seen that particularly with women in hunting in the last decade.
women,
And
minorities,
that's been a big positive and a kind of seen as a big win, particularly in the States. A lot more women taking it up.
Yeah, and I think there is definitely a problem. But it's not just the outdoors. Like the U.S. has been in a very long process of seeking for more diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, those sort of things. Like, and that goes back to emancipation, women's suffrage. We've been moving for that, and it's been a struggle for this country. But for me, I try to stay in my lane, which my lane is the outdoors. And the outdoors have been, as a tradition of being in the outdoors, have been inclusive since the beginning because we all started in the outdoors. Like, no matter what culture, where you're from, you got a background of people who had a tradition of foraging, hunting, fishing. And what has happened in modern times is, 40s, 50s, 30s even, as the park system was coming on, being in the outdoors was becoming a big thing. A lot of the marketing machines felt that the person who was going to buy outdoor things was white, middle-aged. And so all of the marketing went in that direction, which means all the ads, all the publications, everything you saw showed people that look like that doing these things. And, there is a thing that happens if you hold up a blue shirt and you say boys wear blue, and you hold up a pink shirt and say girls wear pink, then all of a sudden you see blue, you think boy, you see pink, you think girl. It's social conditioning. So if every time you see somebody in camo with a gun, they're white and male, it's social conditioning. And whether that, impacts you or whether it's true, whether the outdoors and outdoors people are inclusive or not, it doesn't matter because the social conditioning has led you to believe that it's not going to be inclusive to you, which makes you feel awkward when you go out to do those things. And particularly for women and minorities, there was a period of time where you couldn't buy a gun in America. Like, that was not a thing. Like, and if you did have a gun, it was not safe for you to have a gun because you may be shot for just holding a gun. So when it comes to hunting with minorities, there are some significant social barriers there. I find that I had those barriers myself. Like, I didn't even know I had those barriers because the way I came to hunting was a point in time where I was like, I didn't really care about those things. I was just going to go hunting because I wanted to do it.
You were older.
Yeah, I was older and I wanted to do it. But then ultimately, kind of when the George Floyd thing happened and the movement, the BLM movement that had been around sort of went to the forefront of the conversation, and the outdoor companies started making a priority to be more inclusive in their imagery, I found that I was confronted with going back through my past and looking at, you know what, there actually was a time where I was a kid when I came to the conclusion that hunting in the outdoor community was not for me, not because anybody told me it wasn't for me, because I didn't see anybody who looked like me doing it, and I also had nobody to take me to do it, and I was also very jealous of all the people who did have someone to take them to do it.
Because you wanted to do it.
Because I wanted to do it, but I didn't have an entry point, and I also didn't see anybody who looked like me doing it. And so it was very easy from going from not having an entry point to then not seeing anybody for me to just say, well, hunting is for racist white guys. which is not true. So, but that was my own limitation that I put on myself. Now, there are some very real moments in our history where being in the woods as a woman, with or without a gun, or being in the woods as a minority, with or without a gun, has not been safe. That's a real thing. Less safe in certain parts of the country than if you were white and male. And it's still a case in a lot of places. But to me, that all goes back to social conditioning. It's all a social conditioning thing. So to me, the answer is to normalize showing a broad group of people doing things. So in our programs, we intentionally select applicants and build communities that focus on socioeconomic, racial, gender, diversity, sexual preference, diversity. We try to bring a diverse group of people. And by diversity, I mean that also means that middle-aged white males should be there too. Like, for us, diversity is truly diversity. Now, that may mean that we intentionally stand the equation on its head to where, middle-aged white male is 20%, 30% of the group. And then the rest is, from all these diverse different areas. And that creates a dynamic that normalizes the program. But I personally like to focus on socioeconomic diversity the most. And, this year we're going to be test piloting a program where we have a scholarship base fund. The previous years, we were just kind of doing it. Everybody paid a flat fee. It was around $250. You got to be in the program. This next year, we're actually going to roll out the program at full cost, around $1,400, $1,500, and then have a scholarship program that allows people to come in all the way for free. If you need a full ride scholarship, we will find the money with our partners to get you out here for free. What I think that does is, by being intentional about who we invite out, we bring people from different backgrounds, put them in the field, flatten the playing field, because it's something that they all know nothing about, and now they can connect and realize that there's more similarities than there are differences between people, and they start looking for the similarities. It's like, you guys have been on rafting trips, right? Do you remember going on the rafting trip where it's like, at the end of it, like, the 15-year-old and the 90-year-old have like nicknames for each other, right? It's like, oh yeah, your old smelly fart. And that's 15-year-old. And the 15-year-old's like, oh yeah, that's the old lady who kicked my butt in paddling. Like she who paddles a lot. But everybody, like, when you get on a river, when you get in nature and you strip everything down, you realize, I don't mean your clothes, I mean like you take away all of the societal stuff, and you find that that humanity binds together and realizes that as a species we're one.
Yeah.
And nature doesn't care.
No.
Nature doesn't give a shit. Nature's metal, in fact.
Yeah, it is. Like that grizzly bear rolling down the trail doesn't really care what you look like. Nope. Or how much money you have. Or whether, like, oh, that guy's got a Rolls Royce. Not eating him,
Yeah.
Or maybe eat that one. Maybe has that extra rich diet.
He's soft.
A little more tender.
Yeah, exactly. So but I find that people unconsciously, it's not conscious, they unconsciously realize that and they mesh together. So we're intentional with who we bring to the program, which creates an optic that hopefully invites more people, but also impacts people to connect from different backgrounds. So
it's a really refreshing approach. You were explaining some of this to us today on the boat, and I was just listening intently at every word you were saying, and I want to come on one of your programs.
You are coming on one, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah.
That was my big takeaway. I want to be part of that.
Yeah. As an observer or as a mentor, we'll put you to work, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to do some work, whatever's required.
You'll come and be a mentor.
One of the last things I wanted to kind of ask you, and this is anything else Tyler has after this, was there are large portions of the world, of people particularly in urban areas who go and work in the office block and their life is in the city, they wouldn't necessarily have any reason to seek out that kind of experience, because the first step is you need people to they need to be seeking something like that in order to find a program like the one that you're putting on, to take that first step, even though it is a very different approach that you're taking and putting people through. How important is it on a much larger scale that people realize their position within nature? And what can we do societally around the world to help people realize that there is a missing piece of their, well, this is what we believe here around this table, there's a missing fundamental piece of their life, of what actually makes them a human being, that they need to find. And I think we all believe that it would make the planet a better place. Maybe you could expand on that a little.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Well, first of all, it's critical that we all, in my mind at least, is critical that we all realize that we are nature. And it's critical because you can't respect nature when you think that you're separate from it. When you understand that you are nature, you take a different level of respect towards the things that are nature, which is everything else. And it is important for people in urban settings to understand it. You don't have to go to the woods. You don't have to go into the outdoors to understand that you're nature. But what you do have to do is understand that when I walk into my condo, when I walk into my apartment, when I go into my house in the city, my townhome, whatever it is, nature just walked into the door. And like, you are in nature. You are part
Take your shoes off, you animal.
Yeah, that's right. But nature, just you are wherever you go is nature.
Yeah.
And when you start,
Urban nature is really cool.
it is
actually.
really cool.
Yeah.
It is really cool. And the more we make those observations, the more room we will make for the other things in nature, instead of just trying to create stuff. Like right now, we try to fill the city. I think somewhere a long time ago, somebody lit something on fire, and all of a sudden, the animals that were maybe preying on us, like, went away, like, got safe around the fire. So we were like, okay, yeah, let's build a fire. This is good. And then somebody built a thatch hut, and they said, well, this is great. I don't get wet anymore. And then fast forward now, where we're like, yeah, let's just build more of that stuff and push the predators and push the rain and push it as far away from our big campfire. And it's kind of what the cities, they're like these big bonfires to push it all back. And I think we got to rein that in and understand that we want to pull the nature into our cities, that we want to make space. We want to make travel quarters for animals.
Yeah. There's probably a few cities that could do with some grizzly bears taking some people out.
Most definitely. Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Just kidding. Don't come pick me up with a helicopter. No. But I do think it's just like, it is critical. And what can we do? I don't know. I mean, at a large scale, I'm doing the thing that I can do here. I volunteer on the board for Trout Unlimited. So I do the thing that I can do there. And to me, it's, if you are somebody, this is the thing that you can do. If you are somebody who enjoys being in the outdoors, whether it's birding, camping, hunting, fishing, whatever, when you show up to the office, talk about it. And when somebody shows the inkling of a spark of interest, invite them to go do it.
Yeah, foster.
What did you call him, Jeff? Be Jeff?
Jeff.
Yeah. That was when we were talking about Yeti
You
model.
just explain that idea. Just
be Jeff.
Jeff.
Yeah, be the Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff,
Right.
yeah.
Be the
Everybody
Jeff.
knows Jeff. If you're going to go camping, Jeff knows about camping.
Yeah, and so everybody's like, I'm going to go ask Jeff about like what type of sleeping bag I should get. So if you are Jeff and somebody comes to you and says, hey, Jeff, because that's Yeti targeted Jeff. They were like, let's figure out how we convince the guy who everybody asks or the gal who everybody asks how they think Yeti's the best cooler. So if you're Jeff or Jane, Jeff or Jane, let's be, and you're the person who people come and ask, hey, what kind of sleeping bag should I get? Take the next step and say, well, do you want to go camping? Not just, don't go all gear junky on them and say, well, this is this and this and this and this. Take the next step and say, hey, do you want to go? And take them out. And if you're an outdoors person, if you're mountain biking, if you're somebody who's kayaking or rock climbing or any of those things and listening to this, stop and think, do I pay attention to what kind of plants there are around me when I put my kayak in the water? Did I pay attention to what kind of birds I saw on the water? And if you're not, do it, and then don't just do it there. Do it on the drive to work, and, do it when you're looking out your office window, and just stare out there until you get fired and you have to go live in nature.
And leave the world behind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Josh, we're going to release this pretty soon. And so, for people listening, what are the opportunities this year? When are the next workshops? How many spots do you have? Where do those opportunities lie?
So we will, hopefully timed with the release of this, have a section on our website, spokehollow.com, SPOKEHOLLOW.com, that will have our outdoor education programs. They won't be ready to sign up, but they will have a spot where you can drop your email in, and then you'll get added to the communication as soon as the application's open, which I'm hoping will be sometime around July.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, it's been a real pleasure to spend the last 2 days with you.
Yeah.
You might have to tell me not to come and visit so often. I think after this trip, because I got to come down and fish with you more.
If you just stay, you don't have to come visit.
This is true, but after 90 days, they kick me out of America. So, I have to go at some point.
You can hide out on the ranch.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. It has been an education for me. I really have enjoyed the insightful conversations on the water and with a beer in hand.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Me too. I really enjoyed the time that I've spent with both you guys, and hope that we do this a lot.
Thanks, Josh.
Cheers.